Hey there, welcome to the College Investor Audio Show. We were hanging out at the ASU+GSV Summit EdTech Conference and just had a blast. So many cool people we got to meet and had a chance to sit down with a lot of great people. Our own Robert Farrington was able to interview a good friend of ours, Preston Cooper, about some amazing topics. We're going to get to it in just a second. Just want to remind you, though, real quick, anytime you hear a topic on the podcast, you can always find a bunch of information, lots of resources for you to dive deeper on it at thecollegeinvestor.com. Also, ask questions, get to know us. We'd love to help you wherever you are in your money journey. Just type in the words The College Investor on social media, and you'll find us, pretty much anywhere you are. All right, so let's get right to the show with Preston Cooper.
Preston, as you guys have followed our channel, is the data guy. And we cite his data all the time on the ROI of college, the ROI of grad school. This guy knows the numbers. And so I'm going to give him a quick intro here. Preston, welcome to the show. Give everyone a little heads up about what you're doing and what you're focused on in higher ed.
Well, thanks very much for having me on the show, Robert. I'm glad to be here with you in sunny San Diego. We picked a beautiful spot for a podcast. I know it's audio only, so you can't see, but trust me, it's very pretty out here.
You'd be jealous of the view, folks. We're not going to show you because you'd be pretty sad.
Yeah, so I have studied college ROI for the better part of my career, and I think the message that I want to leave folks with is college does pay off most of the time, but there are big exceptions. So about 20 or 30% of the time, people who are pursuing a bachelor's degree are probably not going to come out ahead. And that's usually for one of three reasons. One, they paid just way too much. You know, a degree which is worth it at $50,000 may not be worth it at $150,000. Number two, maybe they didn't graduate. So a lot of the benefits of college are tied up with actually completing that degree. You're probably not going to be able to get the jobs you want if you don't have that degree. And so if you're entering college with, not necessarily the academic chops that you would need to complete, it may be less likely that you're actually going to get a payoff. And the third big reason is maybe the field of study that you chose doesn't have a whole lot of job opportunities. I mean, there are some fields of study, such as fine arts, where the job opportunities are going to be a lot lower paid. That's not to say that those degrees can never pay off, but you do need to be a lot more careful about where you're going and what kinds of practical skills you're learning in your program to make sure that those kinds of degrees are actually going to be a good financial investment.
I think that's a great tipping off point because we're recording this. People are making those college decisions right now, right? It's that time of year. We're in the spring. So if you were talking to a family going to bachelor's degree, we're talking a 4-year school, like what would be one of the top considerations of ROI? Like what should we be looking at? Is there any general rules of thumb that you've seen from looking at countless amounts of data on when it's worth it, when it's not worth it, and when you might want to be a little mindful about it?
I mean, I would go back to completion rate. I think that is the number one factor behind whether college is going to pay off for you.
Let's stop there. What is completion rate too? Because I've seen some stats that are 6-year completion rates, 5-year completion rates, 4-year completion rates. Taking 6 years also increases the cost of college, right?
That's right. So we know that if you go to a 4-year school, between 60 to 70% of students will finish their degrees within 6 years. So it's better than a coin flip, but that also means that about 30 to 40% of people are not going to finish their degrees in 6 years. And it turns out that most of those people are probably not going to finish their degrees at all. And if you are spending time and money investing in college and you don't get a degree, then you're not only spending your time, you have a tuition bill. You might end up with student debt that it's going to be really hard to pay off. The value proposition of college becomes a lot more shaky if you're not very, very confident that you're actually going to be able to finish your degree. So I would say that's the number one consideration is ask yourself, one, am I going to a school where people have a good track record of actually finishing their degrees? And number two, do I feel confident in my academic preparation to actually finish the degree that I'm setting out to do?
I think that's huge because in some of our other research, completion is huge and financial obligations are a big part of completion too. So if college is a stretch for you freshman year, it typically gets more expensive each year of college because prices are rising. Sometimes colleges front load financial aid. Mm-hmm. If it's shaky for you freshman year, you don't want to see what senior year is going to be. And that's a big factor in completion. So that's great. Completion. What about, you mentioned fields of study. And I see that a lot because our economy is just what it is. You can't necessarily control it. We only have so many architects. We have only so many archaeologists. Mm-hmm. We have so many computer science majors. How do you judge that when looking at costs and what's needed, right?
Absolutely right. So, I mean, behind completion rate, field of study is probably the number one factor behind whether college is going to pay off for you or not. And look, the labor market is the labor market. There are certain jobs that are going to pay a lot more than others. That is just the reality. I don't want to say whether that's good or bad, but that is the reality. And if you major in something like engineering or nursing or economics or even still computer science, you're probably much more likely to be able to earn back the cost of your education and get a much higher salary. But if you choose a field like fine arts, psychology, sad to say, even education, that the likelihood that you're going to be able to earn back the cost of your college education is a lot less. There are some programs in those fields that do a good job, that do get people a good return on investment, but that tends to be the case less often. And so if you're interested in one of those fields, it pays to be a lot more careful about where you're going and making sure that the program you're going to is actually a good quality and has a good track record of getting people into jobs that are reasonable according to whether you have a college education.
I think that's huge. And how, I don't know if there's any good frameworks, but how do you assess it? We were just talking before this that Hampshire College is closing, and I think we're going to see this trend of smaller liberal arts colleges closing. How do you assess whether a college is good or not? I get maybe we have the Ivies on the top, but when we're talking college number 20 through 200, I mean, there's 2,000 of them. There's a lot. We can't even list them all, right? There's so many. How do you know if you're going to a good school?
So there's a lot of great publicly available resources out there. The college scorecard at the Department of Education is one good example. Or you can go look up the various colleges that you're interested in and see what the track record is. They will list things like the share of students that graduate within 6 years. They'll list things like the typical starting salary for students who complete. They'll try to list the net cost. They'll list some other factors. It's not a perfect resource, but you can at least use that as a starting point to investigate, which colleges have a better track record of actually getting people over the finish line and getting people into good paying jobs.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's pivot to grad school. Grad school has been a hot button one lately. I made a video just 2 days ago. I think it's at 250,000 views already. Is grad school worth it, right? And I think it's hard because there are some programs that are absolutely blown out of the park. You see this data, and then there are some that do not. So give everyone a kind of a big overall picture of what grad school ROI looks like.
It's a great question. And the answer is it depends, which is my answer for a lot of the things during this podcast.
It does.
But look, so a good rule of thumb is if you're going to a graduate program that is providing you specific training for a specific high-paid occupation, grad school is probably going to pay off. I'm talking about things like med school, like law school, dentistry school. These are very expensive programs, but the data shows that people usually get their money back and then some because they have very high completion rates and they're getting into really, really good paying jobs. People making $200,000 a year sometimes in these jobs. Where grad school is a much shakier bet is at the master's degree level. If you're getting a degree that is not providing you, really specific training and you're getting it at a really high price point, it's a lot less likely that that's going to pay off for you. I mean, there are even some MBA programs which do not pay off for students. You'd think that would be a good that would be a good bet, but it turns out, because they're very expensive, sometimes people are not getting a good ROI. Masters in fine arts, humanities, masters in education, sometimes even, masters in psychology. A lot of these programs, there are some good ones out there, but the return is a lot shakier. And so students need to be a lot more careful when they're pursuing these programs about whether they're going to one that is actually going to provide them, with a good education and is going to provide them with a credential that they can then take to the labor market and say, hey, this is actually going to be something that's going to advance my economic mobility.
I love that you called out the MBA because your data set was one that I find so fascinating because if I remember correctly, it was something like 50% break even or negative. Then there's 10% that deliver $1 million of ROI. The dichotomy there was just insane. And I think that shows that there's a lot of risk there because of what it is. So one of my rules of thumb is if you're unsure of it, maybe you don't need to pay for it. Maybe an employer will pay for it. One of the best ways to maximize your ROI is to not pay for it out of pocket. And if there's someone else that can pay for it, especially for something like an MBA where a lot of Fortune 500 companies, if that's part of the advancement track, will pay for your MBA. Great way to do it. What, when you're looking at this data, how do you kind of align the labor market and the fact that we were just in a thing about accreditation and state boards? Some of these fields require a master's degree, though, because of these state requirements. Meanwhile, they don't pay off financially, and it kind of puts the individual in a really tough spot.
No,
And granted, we might
Yeah.
not have an answer, and we're not going to solve the
Yeah.
world's problems, but I think people need to kind of realize that this trap kind of exists.
Yeah, so kind of two answers to that. Number one is kind of the longer term, solution, which is we have to take a look at some of these state licensing laws. I don't really think that there's any reason for instance, school districts to be paying teachers less if they only have a bachelor's degree compared to a master's degree. I mean, there's not really any evidence that getting a master's degree actually makes teachers more effective, yet school districts continue to require or incentivize that anyways. And so I would say that, the number one solution has to be if we see that there's low ROI for a lot of these master's programs, we should stop requiring people to get these degrees in order to just work in the field that they want to work in. But, if that's not going to happen anytime soon, there are some things that students can do to try and manage the risk a little bit better. I mean, number one, try to look for a lower cost program. I mean, especially at a in-state public institution. If the goal here is just to check the box to say that, I got this degree that is required for my license, there's no reason to go to a super expensive private school for that. I got my graduate degree at George Mason University. I paid in-state tuition. I think that was a much better decision than going to GW or Georgetown or one of these, fantastically expensive private schools that are giving you basically the same product. So try to do it without debt so that if it ends up not providing you with the ROI that you're expecting, you're not left with a whole ton of debt to pay off.
I think that's a great lesson. And I think when you're mentioning the experience aspect there, one of the things that I've been talking about quite a bit is separating out the degree from the experience. I think a big part of college costs these days isn't coming from tuition. It's coming from room and board and all the co-curriculars and everything else. And you have to ask yourself, are you paying for a degree or are you paying for a lifestyle choice over those 4 years? But one thing I do want to challenge you on a little bit is kind of the data itself and where we're getting this from. Because the world's moving so fast. And I was just reading the headline about the unemployment of computer science majors. We're at an EdTech conference, so a lot of Silicon Valley folks here, a lot of computer science, AI's changing the world, however you want to look at it. What is the world going to look like in 5 years from now? And what if the data isn't fully reflective of these changes? Because kids that are applying for college today in 2026, they're not going to graduate until 2030, hopefully. And entering the job market then, I mean, who knows what careers are going to exist, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do we reconcile that a little bit?
That's a great question. And so this is actually the number one question that I get when I give talks to college students is, should I still major in computer science if AI is going to take all the jobs?
Sure, right?
And the answer is, I think, a little bit more complicated than the narrative suggests.
Right.
So let me just give you the data on what it looks like for a computer science major right now. So the unemployment rate for early career computer science majors has risen. It is above the unemployment rate for all college graduates. It's about 7%.
Right.
However, for computer science majors who do get jobs, the returns are still there. Computer science majors earn about $90,000 a year in their early careers, so in their mid-20s. That's more than mechanical engineering. That's more than nursing. That's more than economics or business or a lot of these other high ROI majors. So it can still make sense to pursue one of these degrees. So the bottom has not completely fallen out, which I think is a corrective to some of the media narratives that we've seen. But I do want to address your larger point, which is that college still is a risky proposition. Even if you do have perfect information today, you still don't know what the labor market is going to look like 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And that's why it does pay to be risk averse here. Yeah, you want to look for fields of study that do have a good payoff, but you also want to make sure that you are setting yourself up to be able to pivot if different jobs are not going to be available. You want to make sure that you're taking a variety of courses. You want to make sure that your department, that your program is actually being forward-looking, thinking about what kinds of skills are going to be required 5 years from now, not just what skills are going to be required today. And also it pays to, I'm going to hit on this again, look for a less expensive college where you're not going to have to take out as much debt so that if things do go wrong for you, you aren't stuck with a whole lot of student debt to repay.
I mean, I think you nailed it. And I think this is a great way to end this conversation. But being risk adverse to college is not necessarily about limiting yourself, but it's about paying less because college is still worth it. I think the data continues to show it. We just published more on College Board studies, and all these different studies keep showing college is worth it. But I think there's that old saying that only 30% of people actually end up in the field that they studied anyways. I think people change jobs like 13 to 15 times now over their lifetime. So your life is long. Things will change. The best way to make the most value out of college is to be very cautious on how much you spend up front. Unless you're a billionaire, then spend what you want. But for most of us, let's be mindful on that cost. So, Preston, thank you so much for sharing these ROI thoughts on it. I think it really adds a lot of color to the data. The data is great, but there's nuance. And I think you highlighted a lot of those points.
Absolutely. And I just want to hit on the last point that you made is that I think that we have, as a society, made the assumption that college is this golden ticket to prosperity, that, if you get a college degree, you're going to be set for life. That is not true anymore. And I think people are recognizing that college can still pay off, but there is a lot of risk involved. And learning to manage those risks is, the most important part about making sure that your college experience is going to be a good one.
Awesome. You heard it here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Wonderful show today. Robert had just a fantastic interview, and there's more coming actually on the podcast. Just stay tuned for that. We have some more interviews to share with you from our time at the ASU+GSV EdTech Conference Summit. You can find out more about it, more info about the topic that was talked about today, and any topic we talk about on the podcast at thecollegeinvestor.com. Thanks so much for stopping by today, and we'll talk to you again real soon.